What's up? This is Seth Mosley. Welcome to the Made It in Music podcast. And today we've got a good one. We've got Donahue of Streamline Event Agency, who is bringing an entirely new model to musicians, to the music business, in a way that you can monetize and expand your reach in a way you probably have never thought of before. So this is going to be a really, really good episode for you. But before we dive in and before I introduce Don, I just wanted to quickly let you know that the Full Circle Music team is always looking for interns. We want to provide as much value and experience as possible to those interested in pursuing a career in the music industry. So if you want to be a part of an award-winning team where you're working on high-level projects, we'd love to have you apply. If this sounds like something you could benefit from, head over to fullcirclemusic.com/intern to submit your application. So again, that's fullcirclemusic.com/intern. All right, so let's jump into this conversation with the one and only Don Donahue. Don, thanks so much for being here today.
Seth, thank you. And I'm wondering if I can apply to be an intern. Do I qualify?
I think you would be a bit overqualified there, my friend.
I hear that a lot these days. I think that just means I'm getting older.
I love it. Hey, and before we jump in, I just wanted to let you know, for those who don't realize, your background is having worked on the label side, and I'm going to ask a little bit about that. But you oversaw a label called Rocketown Records, which was with Michael W. Smith, the artist, and there was a label under Rocketown called RKT Records. And
wow,
my first label meeting in Nashville, like as an artist, like coming down and meeting with the agent, the A&R guy, was with John Andrade at RKT Records. It was at the Moe's Burritos in Brentwood, and that was we connected on MySpace. I think he sent me a MySpace message back in my artist days, and so that sort of opened up my mind to this whole, oh wow, there's labels, there's publishers, there's all this stuff. So, but that was RKT Records was my first label meeting.
That is just a blast from the past. I can't say that I forgot about RKT Records, but to show you the success we had with it, probably the fact that we didn't sign you means it didn't take off very well. So John is a great guy, still is a great guy and a great family man, and I think that's a cool story to have. But yeah, we had a couple. We wanted to do a rock label because we were such a singer-songwriter label, and we rebranded and we put out a few things on that, and that was kind of right towards the end of the wind down, but that was a cool chapter.
Yeah, absolutely. Some great artists on Rocketown and even RKT side. I was a big fan of some of the artists at the time. So I want to back even before that. What first inspired you personally to jump into music?
I was raised in Columbia, Missouri, which is a dot on the map, 120 miles each way between St. Louis and Kansas City. So to go to any concerts, I had to go that far. And I became a Christian later in life at 17, 18 years old. And when that happens, all of your well-meaning new Christian friends want to replace all of your evil secular music like Phil Collins and Journey with Christian music. And everything they played me was awful. And just like, what did I sign up for? Like, this is not cool, And so I was a big music kid, grew up on some classic singer-songwriters, Elton John, James Taylor, Billy Joel. Just that was my wheelhouse. And I went to St. Louis and I saw Michael W. Smith's Big Picture Tour in 1986. And what I didn't know then, but what I got to know years later, was the value that they put on not only the production of music and the message of the music, but the production on stage. And you're too young to remember this, but there used to be a time when stage lights didn't move. They just were cans that pointed at the center of the stage, and that was lighting. But the Big Picture Tour and Michael and subsequently his management and touring company, Blanton Harrell, invested a ton in the product to make it look great. So that was the first thing that I saw that I went, wow, this is really great. And I kind of became a little bit of a of a chaser of Smitty and went to see some tours and, just got to know some of the people there and ended up promoting one of his shows at my university in Columbia, Missouri.
I'd love to put it just park right there for a second. Can you take me back to that? What did you mean at the time they had invested so much into the product? Like, were they doing things production wise that were unheard of at the time? Like, what do you mean specifically by that?
Well, it sounds funny now, especially probably to your audience who's younger than I am, but they had, it was the Fox Theater in St. Louis, which is it's a classic old theater. It's probably a 2,500, 3,000 seat place. And the width of the stage at the beginning of the show was covered with a replication of the album cover. I mean, it was probably 100 feet wide by 50 feet deep, and that's what the scrim was. And the music starts, and they're obviously behind that, and in kind of one fell swoop, that curtain slid in one motion, and all of these Very lights just hit the piano where Smitty was to kind of start the show. And just that, I remember that motion going, how did all that just happen? Like choreographically, how did all that happen? How did that thing slide? How did those lights move? That was a new move for me. And I just remember thinking in that moment, I want to be a part of something this cool. It's a great message. It's not cheesy. Everybody on stage looks like stars. It's wardrobed well. But it starts with the music, and the music was fantastic and compelling. So that's kind of what put me on the quest to go, I want to work with that. Then naively enough, at 20 years old, I just went back to my home and called whatever name was in the back of the probably cassette J card. I called Reunion Records in Nashville, and they said, you need to call this company in New York to book a show. And I did, and called a booking agency and brought Michael to town about 6 months later. Never had promoted a show, put on a tie one morning, went to the Christian bookstore and the Christian radio station and asked for funding, and they funded me.
That's amazing. I love that. Well, the reason why I ask that is just because we talk so much at Full Circle Music and on the podcast, just how much it takes to break the career of a new artist. It really requires and it doesn't matter who's doing it, somebody has to invest pretty heavily on the front end to create something that's different. Even more so nowadays. Everybody's seen the moving lights. Everybody's seen the risers that go up and down on stage. Everybody's, you go out and see a Drake show and there's a big, giant 100-foot globe, and like it's getting harder and harder to outdo each other in terms of production. I mean, you go to
to the point shows. To where was it Travis last year that put a roller coaster in the audience? It's like, okay, we're kind of maybe jumping the shark a little bit with what we can do inside of four walls. Inside of four walls.
So that's why I think what y'all are doing is cutting edge. It's kind of stripping that back a little bit, and we'll get there shortly in the conversation. But I think just seeing some of the stuff that's going on. Travis Scott setting a world record for biggest attended event that was on what's the game that everybody plays, the game, the big Minecraft or whatever one of those games. Fortnite. Yeah. Biggest 12 million people on it, and so that's the new version of that. But I'm sure there was some pretty heavy investment that went in behind the scenes one way or the other. So the takeaway there is, man, if you want to stand out, you've got to invest heavily.
Well, and the other takeaway is sometimes something artistically happens to you that wakes you up that you want to be a part of. And that can be a melody line, it can be a lyric, or it can be a curtain and a light show moving instantaneously that makes you go, how did that happen? Who's behind that? And I had a marketing director one time that had a great line that I told him I was going to steal, and I always have. He had a line that he used that said, I can't, therefore I help. I'm not overly musically inclined, but I want to help the people that are. I am passionate to stand just to the side of the stage and watch my artists communicate to an audience, but I don't have what it takes to go stand on the stage and communicate to an audience musically.
I love that. I can't, therefore I help. That's such a good quote. Tell us kind of the next steps in your career. How did your career sort of take off, and where did it evolve from there?
So the quick version is I got a call after that show in Columbia, Missouri, about a month later from a guy named Scott Huey, who's a booking agent, and he and his brother, John Huey, who's now kind of a legendary artist or booking agent at CAA, they had their own booking agency in New York that was acquired by a bigger booking agency, and they called me and asked me if I wanted to come work for them. And again, I was in hotel and restaurant management, probably making C's and barely getting through college. And I knew I wanted to work with this. They enjoyed working with me, so they offered me a job. And after my junior year at Mizzou, I moved to New York and worked at this company called ICM, International Creative Management, which was one of the big firms at the time. Lived in New York for a year. Again, being a relatively new Christian, kind of was like, I don't think this is for me long term. But the value and education I learned, I really feel like that was my senior year. So through some of the contacts I met promoting the Smitty show, I came down to Nashville and worked management and booking for an artist named Billy Sprague. Billy was on a label called Reunion Records, which was Michael W.'s label. A guy named Michael Blanton hired me to be their first A&R director. So I remember I had an interview with Mike. He offered me the job. I had to call a friend in the industry after the interview to find out what the initials A&R meant. So again, there's a common theme here. Don's tripping his way into some of these really great opportunities, not fully understanding them. But I worked at Reunion for 6 years as a talent scout, and inherited some unbelievable artists like Michael and Rich Mullins and a few others. And then I signed a series of new artists, and that was wonderful, learning the ropes. So Reunion was a really legendary label. They were always pushing the envelope. That's when Smitty's first pop hits came out. That's when Amy's Heart in Motion and Baby Baby was coming out, and Blanton was her manager. So I was along for that ride as well. But then about 5 years in, Reunion had been sold about 3 or 4 different times because they were hot and the music industry was moving and all these mainstream companies were investing in Christian music, which again was my heart. My heart was way more for how do we take our message into the world than how do we take our message into the church. So it was a fantastic ride. But at some point, it really depersonalized what I signed up for. I signed up for a small independent label run by passionate people that loved each of the artists. And at some point when you're owned by conglomerates, it's all run by who's making money and who's not. So by that point, Smitty and I were good friends. We started meeting out on his farm in the mornings and just saying, what if we tried to recreate what Reunion once was? And that was a few people passionate about music, passionate about artists, wanting to change the world, and let's brainstorm what that would look like. It took me a year to talk him into it, but when he made the decision, and we opened Rocketown Records in June of 1996. So kind of that's where that was the full circle of concert promotion to management and booking to talent scout to now I'm the president of a record label. What does that mean?
Yeah, that's amazing. So you've seen many sides of the music industry. Of the positions that you've had over the years, what one do you feel like challenged you the most?
Rocketown had exceptional growth immediately. We launched in 96. We put out our first record in 97. And probably between 1997 and 2002, almost everything we put out worked big. And part of the reason it worked big was because we were really frugal with money. So we made Chris Rice's first record, the debut record on Rocketown, for $25,000 or $30,000, and it sold.
And at the time, that was extremely low.
It was extremely low. Yeah. Budgets were creeping up at the time, and, it wasn't nothing, but it was, I would say that 50, 75, or 100 was probably more the norm of what it take to fully produce. But we had an incredible production partner named Monroe Jones. Monroe and Chris kind of came as a package deal. All of us kind of thought, if we go in skinny on this and it works, it's going to be better in the long run. And so we went in skinny, and the 100% of the success of it was Chris's writing. I mean, he came at a time when, ska was big, and Third Day was big, and Big was big. And, Chris is James Taylor, and he wrote unbelievably simple songs that struck a chord and a heart with people. And, each of the first 2 or 3 records we put out on him sold 250 to 350,000 units. And not breaking down all the math, but that's a really good margin. They more than recoup your investment at that point. So then Nathan and Christy Knuckles came along because they had heard Chris on the radio, and they became Watermark, and very similar thing. Monroe produced them. We went in conservatively. They did really well. We did a worship record called Exodus, which was DC Talk, Jars of Clay, Third Day, Sixpence, basically all of these hot artists of the day. What does your version of worship music look like? I mean, at Michael's heart, he's a worship leader. So that became a Dove Award-winning album of the year. Just kind of, it was a ball that was rolling. And so when you ask me what was the most difficult, managing that growth was difficult, because at Reunion, everything I worked on worked pretty well. But at Rocketown, everything I worked on worked incredibly fast and incredibly well. And the phone starts ringing, and people want to do deals with you. And how do you do this, and touring? And I had, thankfully, my third employee was an attorney, and it was a lady that put our deal together, our distribution deal together with Word Records, a lady named Angie McGill, who's now head of legal for, I believe it's Sony Music. So she's super sharp. But she called me shortly after we started, and she said, I want to come work with you guys. And I said, well, I can't afford you. And she said, I don't care. And so Angie taking that sacrifice let me free up my mind on the creative side more, because that was going to be the hard part for me. Accounting, all of the things that it takes to run a business. So that 97 to 2002, 3 was probably the most fun that I had. It was also the most challenging.
That's so awesome to hear. And man, I always applaud anybody who can go out on a limb and start and be successful at any music venture on the business side. So tell us about how you ended up with Streamline Event Agency, which is where you're at right now.
Well, there's a few things between that. One is this device is the best thing that's ever happened to us. It also took down our record label. 2004, 2005, whatever year it came out, the white one with the wheel, I went and I bought it, and I plugged it into my computer, and for an hour I just had a blast going and finding all my old music and putting it on there and thinking, I'm a Mac guy, this iPod, this is the greatest thing in the world. And then I had the oh crap moment because we used to sell CDs for $20, and now this is maybe getting us 99 cents. So it shows you how I'm balanced. I had a whole lot of fun as a fan, and then I had a big awakening as a record label president. So I went on a quest for about 5 years to try to figure out what's the pivot going to look like. And again, a different podcast story, but we went through a lot of versions of things, including long, protracted, signed negotiations with Live Nation to look at creating a faith family version of what, Michael is going to be the face of it. They were doing these 360 deals with Madonna and Jay-Z and all that. So they saw the faith and family side, and Rocketown was going to be. So we go through all of this, and that took 2 or 3 years. And somewhere in the annals of Live Nation, there is a 40 or 50 page signed contract by Michael W. Smith that was not countersigned by Live Nation because they dissolved Live Nation artists in the time it took us to finish that contract. So
wow,
that really marked the end of the era of Rocketown, because I didn't have the belief that we should keep going, trying to put out independent Christian record labels underfunded and try it again. But what it did open my eyes to, that whole process, was you're not going to be able to replace the live event. And the live event is always going to be monetized. Well, I shouldn't say always. It will be monetized for the near future, because people gather around a common love of something. We like music. For us, it can be X Games, it can be skateboarding, it can be church. We want to be in the same building, exalting something. I think it's Louis Giglio that says we're born to worship, and even if you're not a believer, you don't understand what you're worshiping at a Nine Inch Nails concert, but it's the togetherness. It's the we're in this together.
Yeah,
I have a deep belief that being in the room with something and some people with common interest is really exciting. So the next 6 or 8 years was all about that. It was all about putting on great events, producing some events, managing some events. I did a global talent competition for 2 years for Avon Cosmetics in 148 countries. I mean, it was just like, people see the value in music brings people together. I had met Justin Zabel, who is the CEO of Streamline, in the early 2000s when he was just starting his career as a road manager, and he road managed all of the Rocketown tours. And I knew if the buses were leaving with Justin on them, then it's going to be a great experience. The artists love him. He's incredible with details. And Justin and I had a great relationship. Flash forward to 4 or 5 years ago, we're both sharing, common workspace at an eSpaces kind of place, and we reconnect. And, he's just built this incredibly great event company that, puts on corporate events and has a tremendous roster of clients and doing what he does well, logistics. He is a very creative person, puts things together. But we started talking about what would it look like if I consulted with him on the creative side a little bit. So we worked together for 3 years. We kind of rebranded the company. We changed a lot of the terminology we were using. That's a big thing for me, is when words and topics start to get old, what are the new words you can use to replace them? Say the same thing, but replace them. And the corporate market didn't have a lot of appeal to me, but what had appealed to me was, how do you give artists a chance to communicate to these crowds? So over the 3 years we did consulting, we did a lot of great work. And then at the beginning of this year, we both just kind of went, hey, it might be cool to just expand that role and come in and reimagine another service that we could offer through Streamline.
I love that. Well, I know Justin really well. He was my neighbor when we lived in West Haven for years.
That's great.
So we would
Good man, great company, good leader.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe tell us a little bit more. You touched a little bit on it, but tell us more about Streamline and what you do as a company. I know there's definitely some different opportunities that maybe didn't exist before through what you guys are creating.
Well, so we branded, when I started with the consulting, it was Streamline Production Group. And we immediately went, if you say the word production group, your mind in the corporate market goes to setting up chairs, screens, stages, sound and lights. And Justin wanted to go much further than that. So we went through a process and rebranded it Streamline Event Agency. And in the music business, the word agency or agent is normally synonymous with a CAA or a William Morris or a booking agent. In the corporate world, an agency is really somebody who helps you with your messaging. It's Doe Anderson. It's the people, the big ones that have clients like Procter and Gamble, and that it's Don Draper. It's Mad Men. It's you go in and they help you with your messaging. So we like to think about, we can offer lots of services, including the boring kind of ones that I just mentioned. But what we'd really like to help you with is, a year out from your meeting, what is the message that you want to help communicate to your team? And how do we create a more compelling story to tell that? Part of that is taking their content and helping with writing. Part of that is visuals. But then part of that is what we've been building, this using creativity to reinforce content. So one example of that would be, if you can picture, say, a manufacturing company. Let's take something that just feels kind of like a flat organization, and everybody knows that once a year they have to come in and they have to learn about the new product that they're going to launch, and that's required, and that's good. And 500 people can come into a convention center, and they have a schedule, and they attend 3 general sessions in the morning, and they have lunch, and 3 in the afternoon, and a cocktail party. Well, how do we break all that up to think about today's environment? One of the things that we recommend right away is everything needs to be shorter bursts of communication. So your CFO should not talk for 50 minutes, because you're going to lose everybody in 15 minutes. The goal of what we're trying to do is keep people off their phones, and it's keep people engaged in what you're doing. Well, in order to do that, sometimes you need help. So we've kind of created a structure that says, hey, at the end of that general session, which might be 9 to 11:30, let Streamline take your theme of the morning, and then let's bring somebody out to do something visually that stimulates the senses to reinforce that. So let's take something as generic as teamwork. We're gonna get the marketing person's report, we're gonna get the president's report, and then we're gonna have a keynote that all are gonna talk about teamwork and how to work together inside of teams, outside of teams. Well, that's all good, but we're gonna help you pick the right keynote. They're gonna have some energy, they're gonna have some humor, they're gonna keep you going. But then 15 minutes before lunch, we will bring out the person that we use sometimes is a magician named Justin Flom. Justin's a world-class magician. He's been on every show you can think of. But Justin's a fantastic communicator, high energy, good looking. So I call him like Ryan Seacrest. It's like he has it all. Well, he comes out, and then I will have scripted for him, or we will have scripted for him, some suggestions of the 187 tricks, pick 3 that reinforce teamwork. So it can be about trust. It can be, he's got one particular thing that it sounds weird to say, especially in today's environment, but basically he'll have somebody shoot a BB into his nose and then pull it out of his eye. Well, he'll talk about how that is all trust. You are trusting this person is going to do what you say. You're going to pull the trigger at the right time. You're going to do all this. Well, obviously that blows the audience away. But we've written the script that says this is about trusting each other. So then when we get the feedback back from CEOs that are saying, our employees are remembering the points better because of what you did with creativity, that's success. So that's what, now, that doesn't have to be just magic. It can be songwriting competitions. You break teams into, and you have great Nashville songwriters teach them the basics of how to do that. It can be culinary. It can be all of these different things that you can use, so long as the artist understands it's not about their show, it's about reinforcing the content. So in a time when everybody's looking for new things to do with their talents, I think we're developing a pretty good stable of things to offer.
I love that. That's such a creative idea. And I don't know, I think there's just a lot of good parallels that musicians can take away from this, and that you constantly have to be innovating and finding ways to keep people's attention. Just for me personally, like I kind of honestly have a hard time going to shows because you know exactly what's coming next. Like you've seen it 1,000 times. Like there's very few shows that I've been to in the last, like some of my even favorite artists. Like I saw Lenny Kravitz last year. That was like a bucket list thing. But I'm like, man, halfway through, 40 minutes into it, I'm like yawning. I'm like, how many more drum solos? And now we introduce the band, and then this part comes, and then there's a big trash can ending, and then. So I love that the takeaway is like be entertaining. I think Cirque du Soleil has this thing figured out. I think Las Vegas has it figured out. They know how to keep people entertained, and a lot of artists are just not good at that. They're good at getting up and playing their songs.
I'll go a generation back. U2 is my desert island band, but I shouldn't say it this way. When I saw their Zoo TV tour in 1992, which was the most mind-blowing thing I've ever seen, then I saw they keep everything they do. They keep somebody in their team, Willie Williams, that is constantly considering how to show a show in a new way. So I've not been a fan of their music for a while, but when they decide to play the 360 tour in the round in a stadium, I want to go see what that looks like. The stage becomes part of the show. When their last one, they decide to run the length of the arena with a split screen that has elevators in it that you can see through. I'm like, I want to go see part of that. Now, some of that you could say, okay, that's just trickery because the music's not quite as good as it used to be. But I'm also compelled by that. It means they're striving to give their audience something that's not just, here's the first 3 songs, here's the band introduction, here's the drum solo, here's the fire, here's the encore. It's striving to keep your audience engaged in something else.
Yeah. So I love that. And so obviously, for the people listening to this podcast who are, a lot of them may be working with artists or they are artists themselves, striving to create new forms of revenue to exploit their talents maybe in new ways. How are they sort of like, how are musicians partnering with you guys on these type of ventures, and what opportunities are there?
It's pretty much call out for us right now. After the years I've had here and Justin's had here, we kind of have a go-to list of people that we know meet the criteria. Again, it's not only their talent, it also has to be their personality. But I would love to expand that list. I would love for people to reach out to us to say, hey, I heard what you're doing. I'm interested. Can we talk about it? Because I honestly need more applications. I need more than music, magic, and culinary. I need other things to be done. I mean, comedy can work, but it's flat. Sometimes comedians do what they do. They've got us. They're great. They do what they do. They get people laughing. But I've got to have something that infuses everything together. So, I'm wide open to pitches, to talks. And also, it's not all Streamline is doing. I mean, we're launching this year, we're launching Streamline Creative Studio, which is developing video content for concert walls and for corporate walls, because we might not get the whole gig, but we might be excellent at creating the visuals that tell the story. So we've got Streamline Event Agency, which is the mothership, Streamline Creative Studio, which is getting ready to come out, which is kind of visual storytelling, and then Streamline Touring, which really is tour managers and producers, just keeps the wheels running. But those wheels aren't going to be running much in 2020. So we're looking at, what does that look like? We just saw an article that, by the time this comes out, it might be commonplace, but drive-ins are starting to put on concerts. Stay in your car and see a show. It's like, okay, we're gonna have to think about different ways that we can put on shows, because for right now we can't get together. The whole idea of a concert is being packed together. social distancing doesn't work when we go back to that whole story I told earlier about people want to be in the room with people that love the same thing they do. That's about togetherness. That'd be really hard to replicate if you have to be in these little cubbies of 6 feet between people. But this idea of a drive-in I thought was brilliant. You can put your family in the minivan, roll down your windows, and have 150 or 1,000 cars in a parking lot and the big stage, and you can do it. It's like, wow, that people are gonna get smart about this.
Yep. I love that. So, and really, just to break it down too, I want to get across to people there is a very certain type of talent pool that you guys look for who can pull this type of entertainment off. Do you have any examples of musicians or talent that you work with? You mentioned Justin Flom works really well. Are there other examples of like people who are just absolutely nailing this thing, just so we can kind of study them, we can research what are they doing, how are they communicating, how are they presenting themselves?
I use on the songwriting side, I use Barry Dean and Natalie Hemby a lot. They are super hit songwriters, so their schedules usually don't let them work for us a lot, but they're really good communicators. Let's see, I was thinking of one other. Again, it goes kind of to the magic side, but Harris III is unbelievable, and he runs a conference called the Story Conference, which is all about the importance of storytelling in your marketing message. So he is I don't know Harris as well as I know Justin, but I'm getting to know Harris. What I love about his story is he kind of went from being a touring artist to being smart enough to say, what if I taught storytelling on a higher level? And now he does this annual meeting that sells out every year, and it's Fortune 500 CMOs that come to hear about it. So he's a great example of somebody who is exceeding that level of communication beyond just his craft. But I also think there's a lot of people that are working towards it. I get more calls from artists. In Nashville, we have a great station, Lightning 100. I get Lightning 100 artists calling, and by the time I finish talking with them, I realize, they don't have that connection to the content that I need. They might be a cooler name or they might be on the charts, but they just want to play their set. And there's a big difference between playing your set and being an entrepreneur. So because it's a new idea, the list is pretty small. But the ones who are really good at it are chefs because of the Food Network, because they've had to learn how to be good communicators, and they've had to learn how to be clever. The Chip and Joanna Gaines they're outside of our ability to get them. But that reality TV thing, when done right, especially on HGTV or Cooking Network or things, those are people that have had to learn to communicate to people well, something that's a pretty high level craft. And that's what I'm looking for.
Well, I love that. That's a great quote. And I just wrote that down. There's a big difference between playing your set and being an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. What do you mean when you say that? Because there's a lot to unpack there.
Well, you talked earlier about your meeting with John Andrade and RKT Records. I remember right about that time was when and you mentioned MySpace. We started making a measurable how many people do they have following them on MySpace. The shift went from Chris Rice had no audience other than people that knew him at camps. He started at 0, but he had music that moved people fast. In between the time of 1997 and 2005, a lot of the responsibility of building your career moved to the artist. And we got to a point, and again, I haven't been in the label game for 10 years. I would assume that this is still the case. But now the artist has to bring the audience to the label, who can then take them to another level. That was never the case. The case was always about the music. The case was always about the is this going to compel people to buy a CD? Now it's, can I pour some special sauce on somebody who already has a big following? I have a close, I have a neighbor, again, in Chris Carava, who has a band, Dashboard Confessional. And I met Chris at a bus stop dropping our kids off. I didn't know Dashboard that well. I knew the name, but when I went and saw him at the Exit Inn or the Ryman or somewhere, I remember being so inspired by the 35 to 45-year-old people in ball caps with beard. Like, they were living. Chris broke. He was the emo guy. He broke in the early 2000s and became this torchbearer for tortured kids. Well, now those tortured kids have a minivan and 3 kids and all that, but they still go to sing every word of every song at the top of their lungs. Chris is one of the most soft-spoken, introspective, quiet people I know. So Chris's leadership is really more about how he tapped into people's heart story. So I look at him as a serious entrepreneur. I would not put him in the situation that I'm talking about in the corporate environment, because he doesn't have that flom mentality. So it looks different for different people all the time. But what's going to work best in the corporate side is the bigger personalities. You know, the more bombastic they are, the better, when it's authentic. So we all know now that musicians and artists need to be the CEO. They need to be the entrepreneur. But there's a difference between being it and saying that you're it.
Yeah, that is so good. Honestly, one of the best little minute sound bites I think we've had in our podcast history. So thank you for sharing that. That's such good.
Can I quote you on that?
I will quote. You can quote me on that. I just think that's you hit the nail on the head. So many people who break into the music industry do not realize that the artist has to bring the audience and the music, not just the music anymore. And so really what a lot of people's focus on, and it's hard. It's really hard. That's why there's so few people who succeed at it, because you not only have to be a great communicator, you also have to write amazing songs and then be able to deliver those songs live and tell the story. And like you said, be a leader and tap into people's heart story. So,
well, it's easier than ever to get your music out there, but the filter system is much harder to get it exposed. Like, I saw somewhere recently, I forget where it was, but I saw a series of kids. My daughter is graduating college tomorrow, but she's not going to have a ceremony. And, you know, the campus is closed. And so we're having a party here at the house. But I watched something the other night, was these graduates of 2020 that are kind of got shafted here this last quarter of the year through COVID.
Yeah, that's so terrible. I can't even imagine.
But what I was unbelievably impressed by is 8 kids out of 10 who go on camera and talk are pretty good. They've grown up doing this. You know, that's different too. They know how to say the words. They know how to look at the camera way better than I do. They know they were raised on American Idol. They're raised on Let's Go to Commercial. They're raised on all of that. So, but if they don't have the stuff behind it, it's only half the equation. So they're way better at being natural at promoting, but they have to promote something great. So you make a good point that both have to arrive at the same time. And when it happens, that's pretty magic. And that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, so good. Couple more questions, and then we'll jump into our lightning round. What is the business model for companies that hire you? Is it just like they pay you a fee or a percentage of, you know, ticket sales, or how do they kind of engage with you?
Well, with Streamline, basically what we are looking for is companies that are putting on high-end conferences, and they will have a budget that they come to us with and say, we have X to spend. Here are the services that we can do. And then we will negotiate all of that. So if we put in a line item that says we need X amount of money for talent, then it's up to me to manage that number to where we're paying the talent something, Streamline's making something, we're writing the script, we're working collaboratively with the artist. So the business model is really more traditional on the corporate meeting side. Like, most big companies have annual gatherings. Some are huge, some are thousands of people, some are 50 people. We're working much more on the large scale, and that's just a part of a big company's annual budget. We have a great client, Carrier Air Conditioning, and they do 4 or 5 events a year because they do regional things, they do award shows, and then we're always thinking about, again, if you go back to, we want Streamline to be set apart by its production value. We want people to say that meeting looked and felt different than the others. So the business model really is, we are hunting for companies that want to up the representation of their live events.
I love it. So how can musicians get involved and to be a part of what you're doing?
Well, I mean, part of it is again, bringing something new to the table that we notice. I'm looking for things all the time. I mean, sometimes I just get a request that says, I have X budget and I need X 75 minutes of music done. Don't care about the content. I need entertainment for my party. Well, I've got 300 people on a list that I can call and do that. What I'm looking for really is, who are the people that can help connect us to the whole story better? And it's getting the word out through things like this. It's why I wanted to talk with you about it, because I want people to know, in a time when things are drying up and fees are going down, this is, you're not going to retire off of this, but you're going to be seen in front of a lot more people that would probably never have bought a ticket to your concert or downloaded your music. But you're going to, if you're good at what you do, 2,000 people will go back to various parts of the country talking about what they learned from you.
So good. So is there an avenue that people can make submissions?
Well, streamlineeventagency.com is fine to start there.
Okay.
My contact information is on that page. They can certainly email me directly on that. Yeah, and I'm happy to deal with people. I think you and I have covered pretty clearly what I'm looking for. Yeah. So if you're a small independent bluegrass band looking for gigs, that's not going to resonate. But if you are an artist that's going, gosh, I've got 10 years of this, I'm looking for something else. I mean, we just had I probably shouldn't say, a major university in the state of Texas reach out to us and say, we want to celebrate our nursing school because the nurses who are graduating are basically going straight into the field to help with this pandemic. So we want to have a system-wide party for them, and we want music to be part of that. Well, I then go on my grid, my Excel grid that says, okay, here's how much Brad Paisley is to do a concert, and here's how much Brad Paisley is to do a private concert, and here's how much Brad Paisley is to do a corporate concert. And I had to start a new column that says virtual. So it's like, I'm calling agents and we're just laughing at each other going, well, how do you price this? I mean, I'm just using Brad as an example. I haven't talked to Brad's agent or anything, but we're asking him to sit on his couch and do 40 minutes. That's different than his 4 trucks have to run and his band and all that. So everything's kind of changing in the way all this works, but it's another opportunity. Depending on when we all start going back, we've got to figure out ways to communicate the power of entertainment through these screens in the most compelling way possible. And that's another thing we're working on by launching a pretty robust network that will hopefully have that interactivity. Yeah. I think I'm off topic, but I'll tell one more quick story. Caraba Dashboard did a show the other night, and it was called As Social as We Can Get, which was a great name. And for a half hour before he played, they showed little videos, and they had a great chat room running down the side. Well, he has such a rabid fan base that there were 5,000 people responding to everything that was going on in the videos. And it was so cool to see people's favorite moments. I remember I was there, I was this. And then when he did his concert, which was just in his basement, same thing. As soon as he hits a chord, 80 people are saying, oh, I can't believe he's playing this. It's like, that's as interactive as we can get right now. But it was super cool because of the incredible fan base he's built.
I love it.
Fan base. That's it.
That's the key. Go build a fan base. So, are you ready for our lightning round as we're closing out today?
Scared to death of this, but go ahead.
All right. What was the first concert you attended?
Steve Martin. But he played a 12,000 seat. He played the same room that I had Michael W. Smith in at the University of Missouri, and it was hysterical. You know, he's an incredible musician. Hysterical comedy. I was in 7th grade. I took a date. My parents dropped us off, and they picked us up, and my date wet her pants. That's why I will never forget my first concert. He was pretty funny.
That's a hard one to top.
Yeah, we didn't have a second date, by the way.
Didn't have that. That was the end of that. What was your favorite subject in school and why?
Humanities, because I had an amazing teacher named Conrad Stosky. And he looked exactly like his name says. He looked like Einstein. I'm sure he was probably in his 60s, but he seemed to be in his 90s. White hair everywhere, black rim glasses. And he taught us about architecture and art and light. And he taught me a phrase that I love to use that hardly anybody knows called chiaroscuro. And chiaroscuro is how light and dark work off of each other. And I think that's maybe one of the first times I woke up to artistic endeavor. So humanities, my junior year of high school.
I love it. What is the best road trip you've ever been on?
I mean, probably so we had our 4 biological kids in 4.5 years. So those were closely packed. Probably when they were between 10 and 6, we decided to drive to Colorado to go skiing. Probably a big mistake, but those are the memories you make. They were killing us along the way, but by the time we got there, we had a blast. The ski trip was a blast, and everything about it was fun. So making memories with the family, doing something like that was great. Now, I'll cheat and say my boys, who are now 24 and 22, when they were 18 and 20, they took their bikes and flew to London, assembled their bikes at Gatwick Airport, and rode their bikes to Paris. So they took 2 months to get to, all around Europe and Scotland, and they went everywhere all across England and Scotland and Netherlands, and then landed in Paris in time for my son to take his college art class at the Louvre. So that's an epic road trip.
That is epic. What was the first concert you worked on professionally?
Michael W. Smith Big Picture Tour, the Hearn Center, Columbia, Missouri, April of 1987.
I love it. And lastly, is there a documentary or book that really changed the way you thought about something?
Yes. I got to pass on that. There's one that I watched about 2 years ago, and I'm not going to remember the name of it. It was on an obscure network, but it was on a female concert set designer that everyone uses. Gaga, everyone. And it was the methodology of how she builds everything from clay models to what you see. opened so many synapses to me to the thing we started talking about, is what is it that makes something different? And I forget her name. I believe she was French, but I sent it around to everyone I knew immediately and went, this is another level. So I'll email you that later, and maybe we can voice me over and make me sound smarter than that answer.
No, that's good. I love that. So I was glad that you didn't say Joe Exotic. So that might have been.
I did my very best to get through Joe Exotic because my kids told me I should, but I wouldn't mind having that 8 hours back or whatever it was.
Unbelievable.
Through quarantine, though, we have definitely found some things. But last night, we watched the new Seinfeld episode on Netflix, and I forgot through this time, we're, I don't know, 2 months into quarantine, I haven't laughed that hard in months. And I forgot about what laughter does for everything about your spirit, you know, the endorphins, everything about it. My wife and I were literally doubled over in tears. And so laughter is a very important thing.
I think I actually didn't know that came out. Is it a new season or just an episode?
It's one show from the Beacon Theater, and I think it came out this week.
Okay, so it's a stand-up.
It's called 23 Hours or 23 Hours to Go.
Okay.
Because the joke about comics is they work 1 hour a day.
Right. Well, I'll second that. I actually took my wife to the Beacon Theater to see Seinfeld live a couple years ago. We were sitting right like under his nostrils, front seat, dead center, in the middle. I've never laughed as hard in my life, so I can very much second that.
Not to sidebar, but we did take our son who just moved to New York to see Casey Musgraves at the Beacon last year, and that was one of the best shows I've seen.
Such a great theater, and yeah, Casey's puts on a great show.
Great show, great writer. I love writing, and lyrics are the most important thing in the world to me, and she captures it really well. And Natalie Hemby, who I referred to earlier, writes a lot of hers.
Yeah, she's a big writer with Casey. Awesome. Well, Don, thank you so much for being on today. We are going to do our deep dive today on the digital space and how it's going to exist regardless of what happens with COVID, and how there's so much opportunity there. So if people want to hear that, to learn from that, they can go to madeitinmusic.com, and just sign up for the deep dives. You'll have access to that. So Don, thanks so much again for being on the show today.
Seth, thank you. I really enjoyed it. Great conversation.
What's up? Thank you for watching the Made It in Music Podcast Season 3. If you want to check out any of the other episodes from Season 3, click up here. And we talk in the show about these really cool deep dives with all this extra bonus content. If you want access to all of those, click here.